The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm amber hue over the village of Gunida. It was a quiet evening, but for Amahle, it felt as though the world was holding its breath. She stood by the sacred fire, her hands trembling as she reached for the ancient flamekeeper's staff. The weight of her ancestors' gaze was heavy upon her, though she had never met them. For years, Amahle had lived in the shadow of mystery, her lineage obscured by time and untold stories. The flames crackled, whispering to her, or was it the wind? There, in the flames, she saw it, a face, her father's. A chilling breeze swept through the village, and Amahle's heart raced. Something had changed. A force, long dormant, had awoken within her. She turned and saw an old woman approach, the healer of the village, her skin as weathered as the earth. "Amahle, you have been chosen," the elder's voice rasped, thick with wisdom and sorrow. "Tonight, the fire speaks your name. The spirits have called you." Amahle's heart skipped a beat. "But I am not ready," she whispered, stepping back. "None of us are," the elder replied softly. "That is the nature of destiny. You must walk the path, whether you are ready or not." The elder placed a hand over Amahle's heart, sending a rush of warmth through her. "Your bloodline is bound to the firekeeper. The time to rise is now." The words echoed in Amahle's ears. The shock of the revelation left her breathless. The world around her seemed to distort as the wind howled and the flames blazed higher, as if urging her to step forward. The call was undeniable. Amahle walked away from the sacred fire, the elder's words lingering in her mind like an unshakable truth. She was not ready. How could she be? But the call had been clear, the ancestors demanding she step forward into the unknown. The weight of her bloodline was heavy. It was more than just a duty. It was a responsibility that would shape her life forever. She could feel the fire's warmth against her skin, even though she was no longer near it. In the distance, the village children were playing, laughing, unaware of the events that were unfolding in their midst. Amahle paused, her hand against the trunk of an ancient tree, its bark rough and worn. She could almost hear the ancestors whispering through the wind, urging her onward. "I don't know how," she whispered to herself, closing her eyes. But the wind continued to push her forward. There was no going back. Amahle stood by the edge of the village, looking out into the dense forest. The trees loomed tall, their branches reaching toward the sky like outstretched arms, as if beckoning her into the unknown. She felt a pull, something deep inside her urging her to enter. The air was thick with the scent of earth and pine, and the sky overhead was painted with soft hues of twilight. She had always avoided the forest, as if it held secrets she wasn't ready to face. But tonight, it felt different. The fire's call, the elder's prophecy, it all pointed toward this very moment. Her heart pounded in her chest as the decision weighed heavily on her. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," she whispered to the wind. But the wind answered with a quiet rustle of the leaves, almost as though it was telling her that the time was now. The spirits had chosen her, and there was no escaping the path ahead. It was time to face the destiny that had been waiting for her since birth. Amahle took a deep breath, stepping into the forest. The coolness of the evening air wrapped around her like a cloak, and every step she took felt heavier than the last. She could hear the sounds of distant animals, the rustle of leaves, and the whisper of the wind through the branches. It was as if the forest itself was alive, watching her. The path before her was unclear, winding through thick underbrush and towering trees. The deeper she went, the more she could feel the pull of something ancient, something powerful. Her ancestors, the spirits, they were guiding her through this sacred place. She paused for a moment, closing her eyes as the air seemed to shift. There, in the stillness, a voice echoed softly in her mind. "Find the fire within, Amahle. You carry the flame of your ancestors." The voice was gentle, but its power reverberated deep within her. Her hands clenched and her chest tightened. She couldn't turn back now. She had to move forward, even if the road ahead was uncertain. As she ventured deeper into the forest, the sounds of the village grew distant, replaced by the eerie silence of the wilderness. The air grew colder, and a faint mist began to settle around the trees. Amahle's heart raced in her chest as she navigated through the thickening fog. It was as if the forest itself was closing in around her, each step bringing her closer to something she couldn't yet see. Her eyes scanned the shadows, but there was no sign of what she sought. She could feel it though. The fire within her, a warmth growing steadily, fueled by the ancient power she was beginning to understand. The trees parted before her, revealing a clearing bathed in moonlight. In the center of the clearing, a large stone altar stood, its surface etched with symbols she had only seen in her dreams. It was the place her ancestors had once gathered. The flames flickered to life at the base of the altar, casting long dancing shadows across the ground. Amahle stepped forward, her breath catching in her throat. This was the moment. The fire had called her here, and now she had to answer. The forest was dense, the trees towering like silent sentinels as Amahle moved through them. The air felt thick, pressing against her skin, each step echoing in the stillness. She had been walking for hours, the only sound her breath and the rustling of leaves beneath her feet. The weight of the staff she carried was heavy, not just with the physical burden, but with the responsibility it symbolized. Her ancestors' expectations rested on her shoulders. She paused for a moment, glancing back at the path she had come from. The village seemed so far away now, a distant memory of comfort and safety. Here, in the heart of the forest, everything was different, raw, untamed, and full of danger. Yet, the deeper she ventured, the more she felt the pull of something greater than herself. She could hear whispers in the wind, voices she couldn't quite make out but knew were calling her forward. "You are not alone," a voice murmured in the air, and Amahle stiffened. The wind shifted, and for a moment she felt as though the forest itself was alive, watching her, guiding her towards something she was meant to find. As Amahle continued her journey, the whispers in the wind grew louder, almost urgent. They seemed to guide her through the thick trees, leading her toward a clearing she had not seen before. She felt drawn to it, an inexplicable connection urging her to move forward. Stepping into the clearing, the sunlight broke through the canopy above, bathing the space in a warm golden glow. In the center of the clearing, a stone monument stood tall, etched with ancient symbols. Amahle's heart skipped a beat as she recognized the markings. They were the same as those on the altar in the forest's heart. This was no coincidence. The monument was a marker, a sign that she had reached the first part of her journey. She stepped closer, her fingers tracing the stone's surface. The air felt charged, as though the monument itself held an ancient power. As her fingers made contact, a strange warmth spread through her, and the ground beneath her feet rumbled softly. Amahle stepped back, eyes wide with realization. She had found what she was meant to. The moment her fingers touched the stone, the air around Amahle crackled with energy. A sudden blinding light shot up from the monument, enveloping her in warmth. She gasped, her body stiffening as the light swirled around her. The ground beneath her feet shifted, and in the blink of an eye, the clearing was gone, replaced by an unfamiliar, ethereal landscape. Amahle found herself standing on a cliff, the wind howling around her as she gazed out over a vast, swirling ocean. The colors of the sky were unnaturally vibrant. Crimson and violet streaked across the horizon, and the stars were brighter than she had ever seen. "This is the realm of the ancestors," a voice said, and Amahle's head snapped to the side. There, before her, stood an apparition, an elder, tall and regal, her face wise with age and experience. "You have crossed into the spiritual plane, where the past and future meet. You must prove your strength before the spirits will guide you further." Amahle swallowed hard, her pulse racing. This was not just a test of physical endurance, it was a test of her very soul. Amahle stood still, her heart pounding in her chest as the elder's words echoed in her mind. She was in the realm of the ancestors now, and there was no turning back. The test ahead of her was not one of strength alone. It was a trial of her spirit, of her connection to the past and the fire within her. "You must face your greatest fear," the elder continued, her voice reverberating through the wind. Only then will you be ready to wield the power of your ancestors." Amahle nodded, though her mind raced. She knew her greatest fear, her fear of failure, of not being able to live up to the legacy of her bloodline. But she had no choice. She had to overcome it. The sky above darkened, and the winds picked up. Amahle closed her eyes, taking a deep breath, summoning the courage she had always carried within but never fully embraced. The air around her thickened, the very atmosphere seemingly closing in. The elder's form shimmered and began to fade, leaving Amahle alone on the cliff, facing whatever fear awaited her. Amahle felt the ground shift beneath her, the cliffside cracking as if the very earth was testing her resolve. From the mist below, a shadow began to rise, a monstrous, dark figure, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. It was her fear, taking form before her eyes. The creature towered over her, its form shifting like smoke, its presence overwhelming. Amahle's breath caught in her throat, and for a moment she faltered. But then she remembered the fire. The power she had inherited from her ancestors. The fire within her flared to life, surging through her veins, and with a deep breath, she stepped forward. "I am not afraid of you," she whispered, her voice shaking but determined. The creature hissed, its eyes narrowing, but Amahle stood firm. This was her trial, and she would face it with the strength of her bloodline. As the creature lunged at her, she raised her staff, and the world around her seemed to pause. The battle was about to begin. Amahle stood before the stone monument in the clearing, the air charged with energy. The voices of her ancestors were louder now, clearer, as if the very earth beneath her feet was speaking to her. She could feel the weight of their gazes, not just as silent watchers, but as active guides, pulling her toward the truth. It was here in this sacred place that her bloodline's legacy was revealed. She reached out, her hand trembling as it neared the monument's etched symbols. The moment her fingers brushed the stone, her vision blurred, and a flood of memories, both her own and those of her ancestors, rushed through her. Faces she had never seen, battles fought long ago, and a power deep within her that she had yet to understand. Her body shuddered as the revelation hit her. "You are the one," a voice echoed in her mind, and Amahle knew it was the voice of her long-lost ancestor. The path ahead was clear now, but the price of this knowledge was high. The vision faded, but the weight of the revelation lingered. Amahle staggered back, her mind reeling. What she had seen, what she had felt, was beyond anything she could have prepared for. The power within her ancestors, the fierce warriors, the healers, and the leaders who had once ruled, all of it flowed through her. She could sense the strength, but also the burden of it. Her heart pounded in her chest, not from fear, but from the sheer enormity of the responsibility placed upon her. She was no longer just a young woman from a small village. She was the chosen descendant of a long-forgotten legacy, one that had been waiting for her to rise. The voice of her ancestor echoed again, this time clearer. "Embrace your destiny, Amahle, for it will be the salvation of your people." Amahle clenched her fists, her resolve hardening. She couldn't turn back. The journey ahead would be one of struggle, but she was ready. Amahle stood alone in the clearing, the last vestiges of the vision fading as the forest around her grew still once more. But the world felt different now. The forest, the wind, the very earth beneath her feet seemed alive with the energy of her ancestors. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "This is what I was meant to do," she whispered, as the voice of her ancestor continued to echo within her mind. It was then that a dark cloud appeared on the horizon, rolling in with unnatural speed. The air grew heavy, and the distant rumble of thunder echoed through the trees. "The time has come to face the darkness that threatens your people," the voice warned. Amahle knew the storm was not just a physical one. It was a warning of what was to come. She had to prepare. The power within her was strong, but it would need to be harnessed, controlled. She couldn't do this alone. Turning toward the path leading out of the clearing, she knew her journey was only beginning. Amahle left the clearing, the storm cloud looming over her like a dark omen. She traveled for what seemed like hours, her mind racing with thoughts of her newfound responsibility. The forest had grown quieter as the storm grew closer, and the air was thick with tension. As she walked, she noticed strange markings on the trees, symbols she had seen before, etched into the stones of the monument. They seemed to guide her, leading her toward something. Soon, the trees parted, and she found herself standing before a large, ancient tree, its bark twisted and gnarled. At its base lay an old woman, her face hidden beneath a hood, her body wrapped in tattered robes. The air around the tree was thick with the scent of herbs and ancient magic. The old woman's eyes opened, and she looked up at Amahle. "You have come, child," she rasped, her voice both weary and wise. "The time of the storm is upon us. You are ready for what lies ahead." The old woman's eyes glowed with ancient wisdom as she looked up at Amahle. "The storm that approaches is no ordinary storm," she said, her voice gravelly but powerful. "It is the harbinger of change, a force that seeks to destroy all that you hold dear. But you, child, have the power to stop it." Amahle listened closely, feeling the weight of the woman's words. "You must journey to the heart of the storm," the woman continued, "and face the one who controls it. Only then will you be able to unlock the full potential of your ancestors' power." Amahle nodded, a sense of dread settling in her chest, but there was also a spark of resolve. She had no choice but to continue. The storm was not just a physical threat. It was a manifestation of the darkness threatening her people. She stood tall, knowing her destiny was tied to this battle. The future of her village, her ancestors, and her own soul rested on the choices she made in the coming days. Amahle stood at the edge of the village, her heart heavy with uncertainty. The whispers of the wind carried warnings of the coming storm, but it wasn't just the storm she feared. It was the shadow that loomed within her own community. The elder had warned her of betrayal, but she hadn't truly understood until now. Her closest ally, a trusted family member, had begun to distance themselves, their eyes now cold and calculating. This was not the warmth of loyalty. This was the chill of something far darker. She could feel it in their words, their actions, hidden motives masked by smiles and assurances. "Why are you so afraid of the truth, Amahle?" they had asked, their voice soft, but there was a sharpness beneath. That question haunted her now, and with it came the knowledge that this betrayal was not just personal. It was rooted in something ancient, a challenge to the very essence of her lineage. The storm outside was nothing compared to the storm brewing within her own walls. The following day, Amahle confronted the one she trusted most, a cousin whose loyalty had always been unquestioned. They stood in the center of the village, the wind whipping around them, carrying the scent of rain. "I know what you've done," Amahle said, her voice steady but filled with pain. The cousin looked at her, a smirk tugging at the corner of their lips. "You misunderstand, Amahle. You were never meant to carry this burden alone. Your ancestors never chose you, they chose me." The words struck Amahle like a blow, and the weight of the revelation nearly knocked her to the ground. Her cousin had betrayed her, and with that betrayal they sought to claim the power that was meant for her. The sky darkened further, and Amahle could feel the storm within her rising to match the one on the horizon. "You will regret this," she said, the truth of her words hanging heavy between them. She would not let this betrayal define her. Amahle walked away from the confrontation, the weight of the betrayal settling heavily in her chest. She had trusted this person, believed in their words, and now the truth shattered that trust. The storm was no longer just a threat. It was a reflection of the turmoil within her. As she walked, the wind grew stronger, the trees bending under its force, as if the earth itself was mourning her loss. The voices of her ancestors whispered again, louder this time, urging her to face what had been done. She knew what had to be done, but the thought of taking action against her own blood made her hesitate. "But how can I face the storm within me if I cannot face them?" she thought, her heart torn between duty and family. The path ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain. She had to confront the darkness within her own kin before she could hope to defeat the storm that threatened her people. Amahle knew she could not wait any longer. The storm within her family had reached a boiling point, and now she had to make a choice. The ancient power of her ancestors coursed through her veins, but it was not enough to defeat the darkness growing in her bloodline. She walked to the sacred fire, the very flame that had ignited her journey. As she stood before it, the wind howled around her, but the fire remained steady, its flames flickering with a quiet intensity. She lifted her hands toward the flames, feeling their warmth as if it were her lifeline. "I am ready," she whispered, her voice unwavering. "The storm will not break me." The fire blazed brighter in response, and for the first time, Amahle felt the full weight of her destiny settle into her bones. She was the protector of her people, and it was time to face the betrayal within her own family. The night was still, but the air was thick with anticipation. Amahle knew the battle was approaching, not just with the storm or the enemies at her gates, but with the very forces of betrayal that had taken root within her family. The betrayal of her cousin had left a wound, but it was one that would heal in time. She walked into the heart of the village, her feet steady on the ground, her eyes filled with determination. The village was silent, the usual hustle of daily life replaced by an eerie calm. Amahle's heart beat loudly in her chest as she prepared for the final confrontation. "This is my destiny," she thought. "I will reclaim what was taken from me." Her steps were firm, each one a declaration of her strength, her resolve, and her willingness to face whatever came next. The storm had not broken her. It had made her stronger. Amahle stood alone in the heart of the sacred forest, the wind still, the air thick with the weight of the world. The ancient spirits of her ancestors were watching, their presence felt in the very soil beneath her feet. She had journeyed far to reach this point, but she knew the hardest trial was yet to come. In front of her stood a towering rock formation, known as the Stone of the Ancestors. This was the gateway to the spiritual realm, the place where she would face her deepest fears. Her heart raced as she stepped closer, every instinct telling her to turn back. But she knew better now. She had to face whatever waited inside if she was to fulfill her destiny. Closing her eyes, she whispered a prayer to the spirits, asking for strength and guidance. The wind began to stir, and the ancient stones seemed to pulse with energy. The test was beginning. As Amahle approached the stone, the ground beneath her feet seemed to shift, and the air grew colder. The spirits of the forest were beginning to awaken, their voices a soft whisper on the wind. The earth trembled, and the stone began to glow with an ethereal light. Amahle could feel the presence of her ancestors more strongly now. They were waiting, watching, their judgment upon her. Her mind raced as flashes of her past, her failures, her doubts, flooded her thoughts. She saw herself standing alone, a girl who never understood the weight of her bloodline. But now she felt the truth within her. This was not just a trial of strength. It was a trial of spirit, of her ability to embrace her heritage and her destiny. The stone before her cracked, and a deep resonant voice echoed through the forest. Only those who face their fear can ascend to the next stage. The trial had begun. The ground shook, and Amahle fell to her knees, as the light from the stone grew blinding. Her body felt heavy, and her breath came in short gasps. She was not prepared for this moment, not prepared for the full weight of her heritage and the power of her ancestors. As the light enveloped her, she saw flashes of images, visions of her ancestors, their struggles, their triumphs, their sacrifices. She saw her mother, her father, and their journey through darkness. But with those visions came the truth she had been avoiding, the fear that she was not enough. "I am not ready," she whispered. "I am not strong enough." But the voice of her ancestor returned, soft but unwavering. "You are stronger than you know, Amahle. The strength of your bloodline flows through you." With those words, a surge of energy shot through her, and Amahle's eyes glowed with the power of her ancestors. She rose to her feet, ready to face whatever came next. Amahle stood at the edge of a vast chasm, the wind howling around her, the ground trembling beneath her feet. Before her lay a path that seemed impossible to cross, a narrow bridge suspended over a dark abyss. The spirits had led her here, but she could feel the weight of their judgment pressing down on her. The trials of the past had tested her body, But now she was being tested in ways she had never imagined. She had to cross the bridge, not just in body, but in spirit. The chasm before her seemed to represent everything she feared. The darkness that could consume her, the doubts that had always lingered in her heart. But she knew she could not turn back. The power of her ancestors surged within her, and with a deep breath, Amahle stepped onto the bridge, each step feeling like a test of her very soul. The wind whipped around her, but she kept her gaze fixed ahead, determined to reach the other side. With each step on the bridge, Amahle felt the weight of her past and the strength of her ancestors growing stronger. The air around her seemed to hum with energy, and her heart beat louder with every step. She could hear the voices of her ancestors cheering her on, urging her to continue. As she neared the end of the bridge, a shadow appeared before her, a manifestation of her deepest fear. The shadow was dark and formless, but its presence was suffocating, threatening to overwhelm her. "You are not worthy," it whispered, its voice cold and menacing. Amahle hesitated for only a moment before she lifted her head, her eyes glowing with determination. "I am worthy," she said firmly. And with that, the shadow began to fade, dissolving into nothingness. The path ahead was clear. She had faced her fear, and now nothing could stop her. The time had come. Amahle stood at the edge of the battlefield, her heart pounding with the weight of her mission. The storm was no longer a distant threat. It was upon them, and with it, her greatest enemy. Her cousin, now revealed as the true antagonist, stood across from her, their eyes filled with dark determination. The battle ahead would not only decide the fate of her village, but also the very soul of her bloodline. Amahle gripped her staff, feeling the power of her ancestors surge within her. "You don't have to do this," she called out, her voice steady but filled with sorrow. "We are of the same blood. The power of our ancestors belongs to both of us." Her cousin's lips curled into a smirk. "No, Amahle, the power is mine alone. It always was." The air crackled with energy as they prepared for the inevitable clash. The winds howled, and the sky above seemed to split, reflecting the battle to come. Amahle took a deep breath as the first blow was struck. Her cousin surged forward with unnatural speed, using dark magic to enhance their strength. Amahle parried the attack with her staff, the impact sending a shockwave through the ground. The battle had begun. Her heart pounded as she focused all her energy into the staff, drawing on the power of her ancestors. She could feel their presence around her, their voices guiding her. The battle wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. She had to face her cousin's betrayal head-on. "You were always jealous," Amahle shouted, blocking another strike. "This power was never meant for one person. It belongs to all of us." Her cousin's eyes darkened, and with a cruel laugh, they raised their hands to summon a blast of dark energy. The ground beneath them cracked, and a surge of dark magic filled the air. The battle raged on, each clash of power shaking the ground beneath them. Amahle was tiring, her energy waning, but the spirits of her ancestors were with her, their voices urging her on. "You can't win," her cousin taunted, their voice filled with twisted satisfaction. "This power is mine by right. Your ancestors never intended for you to wield it." Amahle's chest tightened at the words. Was that true? Had she been wrong to believe in her destiny? But then, as the winds howled louder, a familiar voice echoed in her mind. "You are worthy, Amahle. Stand strong for your people and your ancestors." The words grounded her. She knew what she had to do. She could no longer hesitate. With a primal scream, Amahle channeled the full force of her ancestors' power, the air around her vibrating with their energy. A wave of light surged from her staff, sending a shockwave toward her cousin. Amahle's cousin staggered back, their dark energy flickering like a dying flame. Amahle felt the weight of the moment, the knowledge that this battle was nearing its end. Her breath came in shallow gasps, and her body ached from the constant strain. "It doesn't have to end like this," Amahle said softly, her voice filled with sorrow. "I never wanted this fight." Her cousin's eyes flickered with something, anger, regret, or perhaps something deeper. But in that moment of hesitation, Amahle saw an opening. She knew what she had to do. With one final surge of energy, she raised her staff high, her spirit resonating with the collective power of her ancestors. The storm above them intensified, and with a final decisive strike, Amahle unleashed the full force of her power, a beam of light and energy that struck her cousin directly, shattering the dark aura surrounding them. As the light faded, Amahle stood alone, her cousin lying motionless on the ground before her. The storm above began to dissipate, and the air grew still. For a long moment, Amahle simply stood there, the weight of what had happened settling over her. Her heart was heavy with grief, but she knew that this victory was not just hers. It was for her people, her ancestors, and the legacy of her bloodline. The storm had been quelled, but the true work had only just begun. As she turned to leave, the spirits of her ancestors appeared before her, their presence gentle and reassuring. "You have done well, Amahle," one of them said, their voice warm and filled with pride. Amahle nodded, her heart full of gratitude. "This is just the beginning," she whispered, and with that she walked away from the battlefield, ready to face whatever came next. Amahle stood at the entrance to the village, the winds finally settling as dawn broke over the horizon. The battle was over, the storm quelled, but the cost had been high. Her cousin lay fallen, and the village that had once been filled with fear now hummed with an uneasy peace. The spirits of her ancestors were still with her, their whispers guiding her, reminding her of the legacy she now carried. Her heart was heavy with sorrow, but there was a quiet satisfaction in knowing that her people were safe. For now. As she gazed out over the village, the first light of day painted the sky in shades of gold and red. The promise of a new beginning echoed in her heart. "It's over," she whispered to herself, but deep down she knew that the journey ahead would be just as difficult. The peace she had fought for was fragile, and the legacy she carried would demand more of her than she could imagine. Amahle walked through the village, her footsteps slow and deliberate as the people of her community began to emerge from their homes. They watched her with a mixture of awe and gratitude, but she could sense the weight of their expectations. She had saved them, but at what cost? Her cousin's betrayal still haunted her thoughts. How could they have turned against their own blood? As she moved through the crowd, a young child ran up to her, holding a small bundle of herbs. "For you, Amahle, the hero," the child said, her innocent voice filled with admiration. Amahle knelt down, taking the bundle with a smile. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice filled with the love she had for her people. She had saved them, but now she had to rebuild, not just the physical walls of her village, but the trust that had been shattered. The journey of healing had only just begun. That evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, Amahle sat in the village square, surrounded by her closest allies, her protector, her mentor, and the few who had stood by her through the storm. They had rebuilt their bonds, but the scars of betrayal would not fade easily. "I've done what I had to do," she said, her voice tired but steady. "But I still have questions about my bloodline, about the future of this village." Her mentor, an elder with weathered skin and kind eyes, placed a hand on her shoulder. "The answers you seek are within you, Amahle. Your ancestors have always guided you. But now, it is your turn to guide those who follow you." The weight of her mentor's words settled in her heart. She had always been the one to receive guidance, but now, she was the one who had to lead. And lead she would, for the good of her people. But the path ahead was unclear. She would need time, patience, and wisdom to carry out the legacy she had inherited. As night fell, Amahle stood at the top of the hill overlooking her village, the stars above her a silent reminder of the ancestors watching over her. The fire in the village square burned brightly, casting a warm glow across the land. "I am not alone," she whispered, her voice carrying in the stillness of the night. Her ancestors, the spirits of the land, and her people were all with her, guiding her every step. But the weight of her bloodline still pressed on her heart. She had defeated the darkness, but now she had to rebuild, not just her village, but the trust and unity that had been shattered. The night felt both heavy and hopeful, as if the future rested on her shoulders. "I will not fail them," she promised to the night sky. The stars seemed to twinkle in reply, as if giving her their blessing. The next day, as the villagers gathered in the square, Amahle stood before them, ready to address the future of their community. The scars of the past still lingered, but the hope for a better tomorrow burned bright in her heart. "We have endured," she began, her voice carrying across the square. "We have faced darkness, betrayal, and loss. But through it all, we have stood together. Now we rebuild, not just our homes, but our unity, our trust, and our strength as one people." The crowd watched in silence, their faces filled with admiration and hope. Amahle knew that her journey wasn't over. The road ahead would be long, but she was ready to walk it. She had learned from her ancestors, and now she would lead them toward a future filled with promise. The legacy of her bloodline would live on, and together they would rise.